Hey there, welcome back to another episode of The Shift with Elena. In this episode, I chat with Nick Klingensmith. We dive deep into his journey of resilience, the power of obstacle course races, and how he is using his experiences to motivate and inspire others. His story is really not the one not to be missed. He's also written a book about it, so make sure you check that out in the show notes and enjoy the conversation. Nick, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chat with you, not only because I am completely envious of the wall behind you. Me and I'm doing my first Spartan in September. I've done obstacle courses in the past, but I also know that whenever I want to do something like that, it's because I need to let something out. I need to, it's coming from some motivation that is just beyond just me, like, oh, let's just do this. So, I want to just dive right in and just because it's just right there. It's all your races are right behind you. So what got you into Spartan and, what are you doing with that?
It was a moment in October of of 2016, and my boss walks into my office and he looks at me and he says, "Nick, I want to do a Spartan race, and you're going to do it with me." And I looked at him and I'm like, "No, no, like heck no." An 8 to 10 mile trail run with obstacles, that seemed miserable. And to train for this, I had no intention of being that uncomfortable. But I went home that night, and that's when I discovered the problem. I already was that uncomfortable. I was 2 years sober. I was a VP of sales. I had just been promoted. I had 100 people working for me. We were crushing it. I was managing my diabetes. Money was good. I was dating a new girl that's now my wife. And I had just decisively beaten cancer for the fourth time. And I was stuck, terrified of losing it all. I was literally, physically, metaphorically on the couch, all those words at once, and I was stuck. And so I knew I needed a change because I just didn't know what it was. And so I said yes to the race because I had been physically active most of my adult life. And just between getting out of shape, getting injured, spending a good time mostly just drunk, and then not getting active, it was really hard for me to sort of return to a fit and active lifestyle. And I just wanted that catalyst. So I said yes to the race. It was 9 weeks away. It was a perfect amount of time to commit and to train for it with the only goal in mind of surviving it and getting through. And I will tell you, despite the fact that there are, I don't know, 200 medals behind me, maybe, I only signed up for one.
Mm.
My intention was just to run one race.
I love that. And then you were just addicted from that point onwards?
It's when I was walking up to my first race, and this was out in middle of nowhere, Florida, outside of Jacksonville. And as we're walking up to, it was an intimidating scene. I felt like I was in that scene from Gladiator in the beginning, like right after the main battle. And everyone looked like a warrior to me. And the people who were coming through the fire, coming through the finish line, and they're covered in dirt and mud and grit and just awesomeness. And I was like, I want to be one of them. So it was intimidating, but it was like exhilarating.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing. I I jumped that wall into the start corral for the first time. And then all of a sudden they just unleashed us into the woods. And it occurred to me that I hadn't felt like that since I was a little kid. That I had spent the last 40 years building a bubble around myself, convincing myself that I couldn't do athletic stuff because of my back, convincing myself I couldn't run because of my diabetes, convincing myself I was a bad person because I had been an addict, like because of all the just literally convincing myself not to live my life. And then all of a sudden, and this huge chip on my shoulder, right, of all the resentment. But then all of a sudden, I was out there just in the woods, running through mud, running through the trees, just against nature, me in the world, not against the world. I wasn't fighting. I was just liberated. And it was such a feeling of serenity. And it was a challenging, very challenging event. Every obstacle was a new thing to me. I'm a house cat, all right? Like me getting out in the middle of swampland, Florida is about the scariest environment you could ever imagine for me. So it was a lot of fears conquered. And when I came through that fire for the first time, I came through it a new man. And yeah, I wanted more. I had defied everything that I believed about myself. And suddenly I'm like, what else was I wrong about? So that Monday, my boss and I went to his office, got up on the whiteboard, and started planning the rest of our season.
I love it. And you have this book with an epic photo of you. They're just running that basically what you just described. And I just love it. Just you muddy running through the fire. I love it. I'm it's a big book and I haven't yet finished it, but it's definitely something that I'm currently reading. But I'm curious that to write this book, it's called Through the Fire for people who are listening, and it's going to be in the show notes. But I'm sure there's, before you got into Spartan, obviously you had your 40 years, you said, or so of life. So take me back a little bit more, what kind, I guess there's a story that inspired you to write this book. So I'm just curious, how did you get into sales? What led you to drink at that time? What led you to, get to a point where you were like, okay, this is not my life. This is not how I want my life to be. Because I think it's a really important story to share for people who are listening.
Just as my evolution into who I am now and what I do now was all about baby steps and incremental progress, so is the way down the hole too. Because I started out highly ambitious. I grew up in Massachusetts to parents of addiction and recovery. So my life was not an after school special, but I was wildly neglected and had to be independent from a young age. Kind of bounced around from home to home as a kid. Things that I didn't realize at the time caused me to have more resentment and caused me to feel like I was a victim and to feel like it was me against the world. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I ended up wearing that grittiness like armor. And it became a defense mechanism to me. So it wasn't quite poisonous at this time, though, because it protected me and emboldened me to be independent. And I was. I paid my own way through college. Um, I went to a boarding school for high school because I wanted to get away from home. I wanted to do something better. Um, but then after college, after having left basically an abusive home to go to boarding school, to go to college, paying my own way through, graduating dean's list, playing on the volleyball team while I was there, having a social life, overcoming a car accident that actually got me several of my herniated discs, all these things, getting out of school, getting a job. And then I found myself in a very similar position, like I discussed in 2016 when I was introduced to Spartan Race. Only this time, I didn't do anything about it because
Mm,
I had achieved so much and overcome so much just to get there. And then I was afraid of losing it all. I didn't know what to do with it. And so I spent too long existing.
mm,
And that and because I had nowhere to place that resentment, it just became internal. And it just made me unhappy and unmotivated. It also made me very limited. That same bubble that I later discussed as an adult with all the things that I thought was holding me back, that same bubble, it was about playing small ball and hitting singles because I couldn't see my way out of the financial weight of paying for college and having a car payment and rent and all these things, in an entry level post college job. I
mm,
couldn't see dreams coming true because I could only live, and see a couple paychecks at a time and I had no safety net. So, if I were to have lost my job at any given moment of that time, like I had nowhere else to go. So I just played survival for a long time and I thought that was what life was like. And that's about the time I got cancer for the first time. And it took me a long time to really understand this. But the first time I got cancer, I was scared. But at the same time, it continued to embolden the victim mindset that I had been developing for myself for quite some time because it
mm,
was a why me. And I think that's why I didn't want to talk about it a lot because I felt that way and I didn't want anyone else to know that I felt that way. And I think that I was also trying to be the gritty hero by not talking about it very much, which at the same time was just a way of trying to, feel like I was being singled out and like I was a victim because I don't think I was afraid of dying. I was just afraid of all the things that I didn't know.
mm,
I was afraid of how does this end? Like, what is my life going to be like? And my cancer was thyroid cancer, which as far as cancers go is one you want. Um, it's got a good prognosis. There's a couple different ways they can do it, treat it. Some are more invasive than others. And so I consider myself very fortunate because I had surgery and a treatment, a radioactive iodine treatment. And then I do have to take pills every day for the rest of my life to try to regulate, well, my entire system. And there are days and times that those are frustrating because, well, your body is not the same that it was 20 years ago. It's not the same that it was 6 months ago, etc. So there are a lot of challenges that continue to go with that. And again, I just let that stack on and stack on. And I'm going to fast forward because in the next couple of years, a number of other things continued to happen. I tore my shoulder playing beach volleyball and I had to have surgery. I got nerve damage from the surgery. Immediately following that, I began sleeping with a CPAP after having been diagnosed with sleep apnea at 26 years old. And I
Mm,
was not overweight or anything like that. I was just born with a bad jaw structure, and that's it.
mm,
So, poor me, why me, was getting a little more consistent. And then I started losing weight, and I found out, and I mean a lot of weight. I was down to 150 pounds. I looked like a little kid in his dad's suit. It
mm,
turns out I was type 1 diabetic. And this was in 2 months of the shoulder surgery.
mm,
6 months later, I'm diagnosed with cancer for the second time.
mm,
Same cancer, same type of thing. Only this time, the treatment was smoother. I didn't have a rough surgery. I was able to go home the next day. The scar actually was better the second time around. I don't know how that works.
mm,
Um, I was able to resume my position in my job and I continued on with life. But there was definitely this hole because I wanted to know why all this stuff exists. And then just when I thought I had a reprieve from everything, that's when my 25-year-old sister committed suicide.
mm,
Now, when I was diagnosed with diabetes, I stopped drinking. Maybe I had a drink or two here or there, literally, because I wanted to be good at being diabetic, I guess. When she died, I started drinking and nothing catastrophic happened. And so I kept drinking. And it wasn't long at that point in my life until alcohol just took over and controlled my life. Even when I wasn't drinking, alcohol was still dictating my decisions, my selfish behaviors, all the things and the defects that I had of who I was and that resentment and anger and victim mindset that I was just holding on all this time was manifesting through my alcoholism. And it happened fast. I mean, it sped up fast because in the next couple of years, it became again the number one thing in my life. And it began to get in the way of my job, my relationships. And so I decided to quit drinking because I was tired of hearing other people complain about it.
mm,
Well, that's never worked for anybody ever, and it wasn't gonna work for me either, but the best thing in the world happened to me. I got cancer for the 3rd time.
mm.
Only this time, they told me they couldn't operate.
It was the same one?
Same place, same type of cancer in the thyroid, but this one was a lymph node that's, like, stuck between the artery and the vocal cords, and they didn't wanna operate on it. And there was a couple other things they could do, and they didn't wanna do those either. Now, fast forward to right now, that tumor still exists. I'm still alive, and it's not going anywhere. So this has a happy ending, but at the time, all I heard was inoperable cancer,
Mm,
bottoms up. It was all that was the excuse I needed to drink. Who was gonna mess with me then?
mhm, mhm.
So I just and I did. I took the let the genie out of the bottle and the drink took over. But that actually did turn out to be a very good and positive thing for me because it led to my last drunk. It fast forwarded to the last time, and that's what you read about in Vegas,
Mm,
where, the book opens with me getting thrown out of a Las Vegas hotel,
mm,
and when my head hit the pillow that night, that's when I made a declaration for my life that I don't wanna live this way anymore, and I meant it because the very next day I flew home, I started a program of sobriety, and I celebrated 10 years 2 weeks ago.
mm. Congrats.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing. Ah, that's that there's as you're speaking, there's just so much that I think people can relate to, but also there's such a story of just resilience and mindset and like you could have been stuck in that victimhood mentality, right? But it's, what do you think it was? Because you could have, I mean, you could be gone right now, right? Like you couldn't even, there's a high probability you might not be sitting here right now if you didn't, make certain choices or decisions or mindset shifts. And although, it took you through several kind of things that happened, but do you remember what it was like besides the Vegas story? But is there something else or someone else, or like how did you like
Well,
make
I know
that,
the exact moment,
please.
and none of those things had anything to do with it. As a matter of fact, it was 7 months after I started obstacle course racing. Now, I started racing, and to do the type of stuff that I do causes you to be intentional with your time,
Mm-hmm.
which means you need to be consistent and committed and disciplined and purpose driven and things that were welcome to my life at this point. I wanted to continue to exercise and do this more, so I started doing a stretching routine at night. I wanted to be healthier, so I started making better eating decisions. I wanted more energy. I needed to feel better, so I treated myself to the first regular sleep cycle and bedtime I'd had since I was a little kid. I wanted to be mentally tougher, so I started meditating. And with all those things, I began improving in all areas of my life, in mind, body, and spirit. And it was obvious to me in the reflection of other people that I would literally talk to at work. I could see how they were treating me different. One person who I barely knew even made a point to point out that I used to be a dick, and he saw the progress in me. And it felt good. And the thing is, I liked who I was becoming. I liked the person in the mirror. And then it hit me. Literally. I was sitting at a red light, and I got hit from behind by a woman who was going full speed.
Mm.
She hit the back of my Jeep and flew off the back. Her car went boom, 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 like something out of the movies. My Jeep got jacked up. I got like 4 or 5 herniated discs from that accident, plus nerve damage. I went home that night, and my cat of 12 years died.
Mm.
10 days later, the lady who hit me died. And though all I was doing was sitting at a red light, it's it's hard not to feel responsible. And I felt crushed. I had undiagnosed nerve damage. I was in tremendous amounts of physical pain. I lost my best friend. All of a sudden, all those things, all that progress that I just talked about and the way I was feeling about myself was gone. And I was literally back on the couch, unable to move, and I wanted to give up. I wanted to quit. I just didn't know what that meant, because the next day you go to work, you get up and you take a shower. You say, I want to quit. I can't do this anymore. But you get up and you pay your bill and you walk your dog and you start doing these things. And so I put another race back on the calendar. Even though I was injured, I had no idea what was going to happen. I just had to I needed something to look forward to, right? I needed something to get me forward, out, like picture a life for myself that is not about today. And so I signed up, and I'm trying to train, and I was flat. Like, there was no emotion, no passion, nothing. And I'm like, and I was listening, or I'd been listening to a couple motivational speakers videos, compilations on YouTube, and somebody going back and forth about, you be a victim or survivor, victim or survivor. And I'm thinking to myself, what's the difference? What's the point of being a survivor, of holding on for dear life, just living, just existing, just taking a beating for what? And that's something that occurred to me at that moment, right then and there. And this is the uncomfortable realization, that at that moment I realized I had not overcome any of my adversity. I had only survived it. The
Mm.
whole time, just crying, why me? Why me? Make it stop does not make me tough. It didn't make me resilient. It made me resentful. It made me angry. The whole time, even after the 6, 7 months of progressing as an obstacle course racer, I was still playing the victim. And at that moment, since I realized it, I made a decision that I will not be defined by my adversity, but rather my triumph over it. I will not be a victim. I am nobody's victim. I am not here to survive. I'm here to thrive. I'm here to triumph. I am a warrior, and I'm going to war. And I will literally pick a fight with any of the stupid things. And yeah, I'm calling cancer. I'm calling cancer a stupid thing. I will pick a fight with any of the stupid things that stand in the way between me and living my life. Because the very moment that I realized I was being a victim, I also realized that it was a choice and I didn't have to stay that way. And
I
not for
love it.
nothing, I was probably just a couple weeks shy of 7 years ago right now.
Mm, yeah, that's so powerful. That is so powerful. What are you doing today, like in this day, to kind of stay on track and maintain that mindset? Because I'm sure things still happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where actually another revelation, if you will, is when I was writing Through the Fire, I was I was probably reflecting upon all the things that had happened, you know. And as you know, when I write the book, I do these before and after chapters because I didn't really want it to read like a life story.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't want to just focus on the negative stuff. But it's hard not to look at it and be like car accident, injury, like this bad thing, this bad thing, this bad thing, and ask yourself, when is it going to stop? But as I'm writing the book and I just saw the totality of it all. I mean, there's one chapter where I talk about 5 times I almost died in one paragraph and I brush over it like it was like I stubbed my toe, And so I'm just realizing it's not going to stop. And as a matter of fact, I don't want it to stop because life doesn't discriminate. And now I have found a way to do something with it. My purpose is to overcome every obstacle and inspire others that they can too. So through that process, I literally, it's like a fucking game to me now. When bad things happen, when I injured myself in a race last year and I strained my hamstrings, I literally was like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm mad for a day. I like getting my own way like anybody else. All right. But after one day, I say, okay, now I get to overcome a hamstring injury or learn how to overcome a hamstring injury.
Mm,
It's when I left my position 8 months ago, massively undercapitalized to go start my own business. That's the fight I'm picking. That's the challenge that I also know I'm capable of doing because if you put these things into perspective, any of the challenges that we face, right?
mm,
You often have to ask yourself, what is the actual tangible bad thing that can happen to me? Like we have to look in the closet. We have to look under the bed, right? We have to see what the boogeyman looks like. And when we understand that most of the things we're afraid of are insignificant anyways,
mm,
or when we find out what the true thing we're afraid of, it's like, oh, I'm afraid of failing in business. Why? Well, I'm afraid of losing like my home. Okay. But do you have a fallback? Can you go live somewhere? Are you going to be homeless? Or is it just that you're afraid of losing the life that you're living right now? A lot of us have it in our head that you always have to move up, but mountains don't work that way. They go up, down, around, sideways, back up, like cut across, avalanche, whatever. That's we hit these plateaus just like I did after college, just like I did in 2016. And not for nothing, I'm just learning a lot of these lessons now still. So I'm sure I'll be able to continue. As a matter of fact, when I in the new book Selling Inspired, just like Through the Fire is very naked and open about the person that I used to be and the my character defects. Selling Inspired does the same thing, only well, it's not as R-rated as the opening of Through the Fire, but my shortcomings as a leader that was based in ego and fear and things that apply to others. So, yeah, when we understand that building resilience is a lifelong process, and the only way to do it is by experiencing things and looking and being self aware of our own shortcomings and the things that we can improve.
mm. Speaking of resilience, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I recently posted, like maybe a couple weeks ago, I posted something around resilience, and I am in the belief that resilience cannot be taught; it has to be experienced. And I had a couple of people that are like, "No, you can teach it, you can, etc." And I'm still like, I mean, I respect their opinion, but I still, whether it's in a workplace, whether like it's not something you can teach. Like you can provide tools and resources, like here's how you maybe you handle a difficult situation, but until you are in it, you don't even know how you feel. You can't even imagine because you've never been in that. You don't know your triggers. You don't know like there's so many like any new experience, right? So I'm just curious, like can it be taught? Because that's a big thing topic, as I'm sure like as you kind of see in the work that you do around, leadership development and everybody wants resilient leaders. But how do you do you just put people through fire? Like, what's the best, if you were to teach somebody, or can you teach it? I don't think you can, but I'm curious, and just having gone through so many things, what's your thoughts on that?
There's I think you're 100% right. I'm looking at this in 7 different ways because I say this, right? I talk about steps to building resilience and steps to building a resilient mindset, but that's not me teaching someone resilience. That's a process that I have adopted from having experienced it, but just having the process does not make you resilient. So teaching it,
Right.
the only way I can actually teach it to that person is to, yeah, physically put them through the fire. However, that doesn't mean that it's going to build them resilience either, because it's something that someone has to experience and learn on their own. For me, resilience thrives when there is a deep sense of purpose. So if I'm putting you
Mm,
through the fire, how is that going to make you more resilient? It's
right.
got to be you going through the fire. We have to You have to go through it to get through it. So I don't think it can be taught. It can be learned in a practical sense on the other
Mm-hmm,
side of
mm-hmm.
it. But yeah, I don't think it can be taught because, again, for me to force that upon somebody, they have to make the decision to come to the other side. I can't push them through the other side. If I push you through the fire, all I did was trip you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't make you any tougher, it doesn't make you know that you can handle it, right? Like, I think also times, and a lot of it because, and I think social media gets a bad rap, but I think there is this emphasis too on this, like, this sort of subculture of, like, of the fallacies of mental toughness, let me call it that. With this false bravado of mental toughness where you just grit everything out because you're tough, and like, no, it doesn't. Start small. Most
Mm-hmm.
people are afraid of big things and they don't start because nobody's going to go through the fire if they're afraid of putting the shoes on. So let's
Yeah.
just start with the first hard thing. You know what I like about obstacle course racing a lot? Probably my favorite thing about it is terms of, like, it building resilience and mental toughness too. It ends,
Yeah.
and I know it's going to end. I'm going back to the hotel, to a comfy bed, to food. I'm probably ordering in because I'm probably beat up, in a nice warm shower. All right,
Yeah.
I've got my massage tools and stuff like that ready. This is controlled adversity, and this is one of the ways that I build resilience physically, mentally, etc. But I'm doing it incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you cross over a little bit, you only have to get a little bit tougher. You only have to challenge yourself a little bit, because every time you do, you have become more resilient. You've expanded your universe. You've redefined the space that you live in. Every time we take one step into an uncomfortable direction, the rest of the world becomes that much more comfortable to us.
Mm. You've mentioned you've left your company about 8 months ago. Why was that the time in
That was their
particular?
choice.
Oh, okay. And then you just
Uh,
had to take advantage of the opportunity.
well, it was 14 months ago,
Okay.
15 months ago. No, I mean that I engaged with some coaches for my own, and I knew that I wanted to be a speaker, and I knew that I wanted to coach, and I knew I wanted to, help others. So I wanted to start learning the business, but I was gonna do it about a year later. But I was in the logistics business at a company that had taken private equity, started closing offices. Mine was one of them, and then they made cuts, and they were like, "Yep, you're one of them
Mm,
too." To be honest, though, I needed it because you know what was
mm,
going to happen a year later? I was just going to be a year more in debt.
yeah.
Sometimes we got to make those leaps. So this is how everything that I've gone through has helped me, because facing job loss is something everybody faces, right? Especially
Yeah.
these days. I mean, employees
Yeah.
are like
Totally.
lemmings, just getting tossed around from company to company. Well, I'd been there before, and I was unwilling to make sacrifices in my life. So I took a safe job. This time I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what my purpose was, and I'm willing to sacrifice everything I have to do it.
Mm,
So I called my wife and I said, "Hey," and I knew this was coming. I was like, "Yeah, hey, they made the cuts." She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you okay?" And I go, "Listen, you know how I'm kind of worried about money every day?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You know how I'm worried about my job every day?" She's like, "Yeah." Now I only got one thing to worry about. And I immediately got on the computer and I wrote an announcement to all my social media channels that, hey, I'm a motivational speaker and coach. I'm looking to connect. I've gotten consulting offers. I've had job opportunities within my space, and I've walked away from every one of them because once I made the decision that this is what I do, this is what I do, and I'm all in.
Mm. And now you've written also the second book. So the one that I have, Through the Fire, is your first one, and then the second book. Tell me a little bit more about that and who's your audience there.
So this book is a little bit different. It's called Selling Inspired, a mental endurance guide for enduring sales performance.
Love it.
Its targeted audience, let me say this, there's 26 chapters in the book. Okay. This is not a sales book. It's a book for salespeople. It's a book on sales mindset. It's a book for sales motivation. Out of the 26 chapters, 4 of them are directly on sales.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this isn't a book about how to cold call. It's a book about how to get your mind in the place so you'll actually do the job. Because, and it's not just for prospectors of sales, it covers everything from leadership. If you're an entrepreneur or any sort of a growth minded position, or even if you just want a growth minded perspective, this book is always is about shedding the past, letting go of the things that hold us back, adopting new mindsets, taking personal responsibility for our situations, setting these epic goals to have these things in front of us, understanding that your job is not your profession, your paycheck, I'm sorry, your profession is not your purpose. All right. Your paycheck is not why we exist. And flipping the script to understand that your job should serve your purpose and your personal priorities, not the other way around. Ultimately, digging into the fears and excuses that truly hold us back from living a life that's inspired. And now I just kind of gave it all away, but that's what's in the book. And uh, so it's practical. There's a lot of personal stories like Into the Fire, but I do blend a lot of physical endurance is mental endurance training analogy. Um, but there's a lot of different short stories to resonate with people.
Mm. And I'm curious, before we started recording, we were chatting a little bit about environment and friendships. And throughout all these different journeys that you've had, how important was it, or, what kind of, I guess, environment, like what kind of friends and loved ones did you have around you? Because I'm always curious about like people that are there. I'll give you an example. There was I was at a talk last week and somebody asked a question and they said, how do you know if you have a good friend? And and one of the speakers said, it's somebody you call when your dog dies, somebody you call when you need somebody. And then I heard a different perspective from Simon Sinek, and I really liked it. And it said it's somebody you call to share good news with, because there's more people that you can call when things are going to shit than people you can call to celebrate with. So I'm curious, through your ups and downs and this roller coaster that you've been on, who's been around you? What do you feel is more important, to have both, to have one or the other?
You know, let me go two ways here, right? Because we're one of the things we were talking about is really as we get older, number one, but also depending on our environments. Like I don't work in a place with 500 employees anymore. I don't play in a team sport anymore. I don't see a lot of other adults that often. So it is tremendously hard to make new, like lifelong type of connections, right? But I think it's important that we get social interaction. One of the chapters in the book even talks about everybody needs a wolf pack. Everybody needs a tribe. We would have never made it this far by ourselves. So even though this might seem sort of impersonal, I at least feel like I'm looking you in the eye right now. And this is better than just talking or emailing or texting or social media connection. Like whatever we have available to us, I think it's important to use to stay connected to other people, period.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I feel like I've been very lucky because, I grew up on Martha's Vineyard. It's an island of Massachusetts, right? I went to a boarding school in New Jersey. I went to school at UMass Amherst. I lived in Springfield and sold telecom for 5 years. I moved to Florida where I worked for one company for 15 years. I've done consulting, bounced around, like motivational speaker, whatever, right? I played volleyball for competitively for 20 years. I was a private investigator for 20 years. There's some overlap here, obviously. I'm not
Yeah.
100 years old. Um, and the obstacle course racing and endurance community. The reason I say all that is because from every sort of phase of my life, I've been very fortunate to take one or two people with me. So my circle still remains sort of small, if you will. But my oldest and like best friends in the world, like the two that come to mind, one of them I missed his call 2 days ago. The other we talk like 6 days a week. I mean, we don't get to see each other very often, right? one lives in Orlando, which might as well be in Massachusetts compared to where I live, just 2 hours away. But the other one lives in Massachusetts, but we still remain in each other's lives. Those are people that I absolutely call about good news. My old boss and a couple of my good friends from my last company, like when I got big wins, even working for one of their competitors, those would be the people that I would let know about it.
Mm.
Absolutely, you want to know who's cheering for you, you know?
Yeah, no, it's so important, so, so, so important, and you're right, it's so much harder to make those friends as you get older. It is, but all you need is a couple, like all you need is just like a handful of them of really, really close people. That's what I'm kind of trying. That's what I'm starting to realize, as well as like just nurturing the quality relationship, because I think that adds to your health as well. You know.
On the Simon Sinek thing, this is one of the guys that I'm coaching. He's finding a similar problem where I don't know the word, but not reclosing, getting less social, so even just online socially, right? And so I asked him a question. I was like, "Hey, listen, let's say right now somebody reached out, a founder reached out and said, 'Hey, I want you to open me a sales team, and you're the manager, hire 5 guys, five people, whatever. Who do you hire?'" He's like, "Oh, I don't know. I'd have to think about that." I'm like, "You should have that off the top of your head."
Mm,
I'm like, "If you got fired right now, who are the first 5 people you're calling to tell, like, that you need to put it out there? Who are the influential people who will help you?" Like, he's like, "I don't know, right? Who are the people that you ask for advice? Who do you give to like a win? Like, you're not going to have 100 people in your list. A lot of these might be the same people,
yeah.
but it's like if you were in a jam, do we have this? Who are the 5 most people? Oh, here's my favorite one. This one I learned a long time ago. It's called the sat phone exercise. I just made that name up. But when my old boss had a boat and they had their like SOS sat phone thing, they needed a person who could be called in case nobody could be reached or something like that.
Mm,
And it had to be the friend most likely to answer the phone.
that's a good one.
By the
Oh
way, it
my
wouldn't be
gosh.
me. I don't answer the phone for anybody.
I know my
My
boyfriend
dad,
doesn't
just in
answer the
case.
phone for any. I mean, oh my God, it's like I'm thinking like I was like, it should be him. Yeah, I don't know. That's such a good question. Who would you call and that would answer your phone if that your life depended on it?
The only
I'm now
person,
in panic mode.
yeah, right?
No.
Like, my dad is probably the most likely to answer the phone.
Yeah, my mom probably for sure.
But not all the time, definitely not my wife. Her
Mm.
mom maybe, but I'm thinking my dad is the most likely to answer the phone. I am not. If he calls me, I answer the phone because he's old.
Mhm.
Other than that, like, if it's tough.
Yeah.
If I'm not expecting it, it's
Mm.
rare that I take it. I answer the phone for my wife to make sure she's okay, like, but
Yeah. That's a good one. Another one I saw today on Instagram, and it was like, turn off your phone for a week and see who looks for you. Same kind of concept, right? That's
Now
so
here's
good.
something on that, right?
Mm,
Because I challenge people who say you need to put your phones down. Now, what I mean by that, right? Yes, we can be slaves to these things, and we do need to set boundaries and times, right? Like,
right,
I'm even trying to get better about not having my phone out when I'm playing with my dog. I'm just trying to get better about being present,
right.
right? Like, but if you need to delete devices from your phone so you don't use them, that's not a device issue.
Oh,
That's
I
a you
totally agree.
that's a you issue.
Mm-hmm.
People need to stop blaming devices for their decisions. I have no notifications on my phone except text messages and phone calls.
Yeah,
None. I have 0 red dots.
same.
That's because those are there for my convenience, for me,
Mm-hmm.
for my to use it. And if I'm doom scrolling, if I didn't have the app, how do you think I'm going to use that time instead? Productive? No. I'm gonna waste it on something else because that's what I'm trying to do at that time. So, I
Yeah,
mean, I get it, like, somebody in recovery might not be allowed to have, keep all alcohol out of the house and something like that. So, I mean, yeah, people maybe they do need that, but those problems are going to manifest in different ways. You can't build resilience without facing the enemy. And the
yeah,
enemy, more often than not, is us, is our bad habits. So, I mean, I get it. Also, like I said, once you begin using social media professionally, it gets less fun real fast.
Absolutely. AI helps though.
I haven't
AI
been.
helps.
I need to learn more. Then I don't know, but
It helps the time consuming parts of like podcasting, for example, like the post production part,
yeah,
which is not fun for anybody. It
I can only
definitely helps with that.
I can only imagine. The other thing too is that social media is a reflection of your choice.
Hmm.
It's not reality. It's reality you choose. You know what my feeds are about positivity, racing, like probably some sales stuff and dogs. All right. I don't follow any political discussions at all. Somebody's political opinions does not matter to me. I will unfriend, I will unfollow, I will block. I don't care what your side of the aisle you're on. I just don't need to see that. That's not what
Hmm.
we might be down on whatever real life, but that's my nightclub.
Yeah.
So I decide who I let in. And most of what I'm looking for, depending on the platform, is probably educational. I think Instagram is a tremendous tool for diabetics, especially for diabetic
Mm.
athletes.
Mm.
So there's a lot of my wife is a hairstylist. She does a lot on TikTok. She's constantly following other like hairstylists and stuff like that. So they don't have I follow other athletes, and I don't spend a lot of time looking. So I want to make sure that the content I'm looking at is the content that I want to see. And
Mm.
everybody has that opportunity to do so. So anybody who says that social media is negative needs to look at their choices.
Yeah, I totally agree. I tend to agree with that. I used to be on the other side of the aisle, and I was like, "Oh, it's bad," but then I started looking into it, and I'm like, "No, it's just actually you need to be able to disconnect and remove that." Even same for kids, right? Like, don't let your kids have access to certain things if you don't want. You know what I mean? Occupy them with something else. Keep them busy with other things when you can. So yeah, but it can be harmful or helpful, but it's totally up to you most of the time.
And I think honestly, at this point, do we really need to be told that social media isn't real? Like when somebody's standing by their Lamborghini and they're 19 years old and they're like, "Hey, follow this do we need to know that's an advertisement? Do we really need to be told?"
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I
give
think you and I don't, but I think teenagers like 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, I don't think
sure.
they know any better. Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm mindful of your time, and I wanted to, before I ask you my last question, I wanted to ask you to share where do you hang out at on social media? If somebody wants to talk to you, get in touch with you, buy your books, I'm gonna put it all in the show notes. But for people who are listening, maybe want to just jump on this now. Where do you hang out at the most?
I am everywhere on social media at Stride Motivation, constantly posting content, positivity, videos, quotes, high fives, whatever, anywhere on social media at Stride Motivation.
Awesome. I'll make sure to share that. And I do love your videos. I'll follow you on Instagram, of course, and I
Thank you, and I
love
follow
your
you. See, positive
yeah.
content.
There you go. It's all education. No, it's really motivational. Like I spend time and I listen to it, and you do your walks and or your post runs or post workouts or whatever those are. So
Yep.
I love those. The last question I ask all of my guests is, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Ooh. All right, I'm going to phrase this differently than I might. What is the one wildly specific and stupidly simple thing that I can do right now to get me closer to my goals?
I
Oh,
like
let me
it.
rephrase it
Please.
because I overcomplicated it. What is the one wildly specific and stupidly simple thing that I can do right now to get me closer to my number one goal?
Mm, I like that. Nice. That's
Don't
a
ask the
really good
second
one.
question, just the first question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Most
For
people don't
s-
get started because we look at the end game. We look
yeah.
at the 104 medals. We don't look at the first day of training. We don't look at
Mm,
just setting the alarm clock to get up. We don't
yeah.
look at just put your shorts aside. The
Yeah.
one thing that's wildly specific and stupidly simple that will get you closer doesn't even mean it's going to accomplish it.
Mm.
The smallest act that you can possibly take to get you started. What is it?
I love it. I love it. Super practical. Nick, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so
Lana, thank you
much
so
for coming on the
much.
show. I'm sure we'll talk more again. And now I'll have to buy your next book, and then we can talk more about the stories there. But until then, I know we're going to also engage you and I at the company I'm working with at Horizon this week. So I'm really looking forward for you delivering the session to the team. I think
Me as
it's
well. Thank you.
I think it's gonna be really, really awesome. And hopefully we'll speak again even after that.
Absolutely. Thank you.